she said that they're seriously talking about the use of nuclear bombs, and how is that going to change the situation with the Strait of Hormuz? What is your understanding of what's going on between the two sides, the United States and Iran?
Well, that's a great introduction to the important topics, and to reiterate, the use of a nuclear weapon, a tactical nuclear weapon, is a consideration and a risk that I have been concerned about since we first started discussing this conflict back in the 28th of February going into March and beyond, simply because of the military options, the limited military options, the lack of the political will, the national will. You know, we've you know, I always circle back to the national power and the trinity in terms of the governed, the governing, and the security or the defense of a nation. And going into this conflict, it could not be won through missiles and blockades. Those aspects don't win wars. And the United States, the governed, does not have the appetite or the national will to go into a prolonged ground war. So looking at this in terms of how does Donald Trump attempt to achieve a military solution to bring negotiations back to the table, especially since 60 days ago, the most feasible off-ramp being the 14-point memorandum of understanding, which did expire this morning. And also, to your point, there wasn't an official 60-day calendar in the MOU, but it is what was discussed in the informal discussions in terms of how this MOU would play out in terms of conditions to be met within the first 30 days with the Strait of Hormuz, and then the next 60 days going on with the Strait of Hormuz, sanctions being lifted, assets being unfrozen, what normalcy would then look like under this MOU. And that off-ramp has long been passed, that we no longer have that exit strategy. So I fear that a nuclear option has long been on the table. We know this based on the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, having to bring the president off the edge, whether it meant withholding the codes, standing firm on no sir, we're not going to do that option in the midst of him even being fired if that were the case. We know that the nuclear option has been discussed. So I'm very confident that the United States government, the president of the United States, the national command authority, is going to exercise a tactical nuclear option because, as you alluded to again in your great introduction, where is the political off-ramp? Where is the return to diplomacy? We now have the United States and Iran with maximalist demands. Donald Trump has now gone back to unconditional surrender. Iran is not going to capitulate to unconditional surrender unless they are militarily brought to their knees, which is not going to happen. And if so, not anytime soon and without a lot of U.S. loss in blood and treasure. And I want to emphasize another point here, in that the nuclear option is not something that I advocate, encourage, or would ever want to see happen. However, as a realist looking at what has been discussed, and now that we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, though she is no longer a sitting member of the United States Congress as a representative of Georgia, she is still likely in touch with people that know things. And we already know that the nuclear option in the formal channels has been discussed. That's no longer a secret. I also take the other considerations around the nuclear talk. The United States maintains a robust arsenal of tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, over 200 of them. Nearly 60 of them are in Turkey. These nuclear weapons can be moved into the area of operations like that. In fact, If I were a betting man, I would say that they're already there. And the B-61 gravity nuclear bomb can be deployed from an F-35. It cannot be from an F-22 because of the bomb bay design of the F-22, but it can be deployed from an F-35. It can be deployed from an F-16, all of the aircraft of which we do have available in theater. So when you take the fact that the capability exists, now that there's the propensity or the will for it to be, and the fact that the delivery option of the aircraft that can deliver it, or the means of delivering it through other precision strike missile warhead adaptation, which is all feasible, is all present in theater. So I fear that in addition to being on the precipice of a regional greater war that is becoming every day, becoming more and more World War III in the actual sense of a world war, that we will see the deployment and use of a tactical nuclear weapon by the United States of America on Iran in the near future. That I feel very confident that we're going to see that. And the reason I also think that I kind of alluded to other considerations is that in the past 30 days, or I would say the past 2 months now, it's been a little bit since that, maybe the last 30 days, I have to go back and look at my dates, but Army General Chris Donahue, the commanding general of U.S. Army Europe, was fired by Pete Hegseth. The commander of the U.S. Army 5th Corps, the theater army for Europe, Charlie Costanza, and these two men are officers that I have worked with, worked for, and know. And they stand firm on values and principles, and they are very knowledgeable and experienced, not the type of general officers you would want to fire in the midst of any type of war, regardless of where it was. But they were fired. Why? Well, the staging of the U.S. tactical nuclear arsenal is in Europe. The theater commander and the Army sub-unified theater commander, General Donahue and General Costanza, are the general officers with the authority to deploy, use, move those munitions. I am very confident that that conversation happened between the president, Pete Hegseth, the chairman, and the EUCOM commander, General Alex Granovich, who also came out public on the record and said, hey, the United States can no longer protect its interests and continue supporting Israel in this war. We cannot do both. That was that general. And then soon after, 2 other Army generals were fired. I believe that they were fired because they put a firm foot down on, no, we're not in support of that course of action. If you want to pursue that course of action, President, if you want to pursue that course of action, Secretary, we don't support it. And they were subsequently fired. Why else would the 2 leading commanders of the theater command and the sub-unified combatant command be fired from in European command? Why? Doesn't make sense unless you look at the nexus to EUCOM, United States EUCOM, a combatant command, is the primary supporting command for U.S. Central Command in this conflict with Iran. So as I look at all of those indicators and I connect all of those, I'm very confident that the President of the United States is pursuing options for the use of a tactical nuclear weapon. It will likely be used on Pickaxe Mountain or somewhere in one of the Isfahan or Fordham. But we know that we've struck those before, going all the way back to Operation Midnight Hammer, and it did not yield the success or the obliteration that Donald Trump tried to sell to the American people. So the president has also alluded to, if you go back to about 2 weeks ago in his saber rattling and round of banter at that point, was that if Iran doesn't comply and give up the strait and negotiate, that the United States will use a weapon that hasn't been seen since World War II. Well, there's only one weapon that I can consider that would have that level of threat, and that would be a nuclear weapon. So I am very concerned that the United States is moving more and more towards that option, which will only lead to a greater range of conflict that the United States cannot address in the region.
if they use the nuclear weapon, it's going to be a tactical move to achieve a strategic gain. What would that be, Anthony? If what would be that strategic win out of this technical use of nuclear? You mentioned Pickaxe Mountain. I totally understand that they believe that maybe that 400 plus enriched uranium is there under that mountain. That's why they're trying to hit that. But the outcome of that, how do you see the repercussions of using a nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon again?
Well, it will not. Excuse the noise. I'm printing out a picture of the B-61 tactical nuclear bomb so people can kind of get an idea of this. You know, when people think nuclear weapon, we often think of the weaponry within the U.S. nuclear triad associated to mutually assured destruction, Cold War. You know, when you know what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that level of destruction, that level of nuclear bomb, that level of brinksmanship. So the difference in that is that we're not talking about a strike from a Minuteman III nuclear weapon. We're not talking about a strike from a B-52 with a Y Yankee M Whiskey Yankee M, that type of nuclear bomb. We're not talking about a Trident II being fired from an Ohio-class submarine, although that is certainly an option because the USS Alaska, which is an Ohio-class nuclear-powered but also nuclear warhead-enabled submarine, is sitting in the Persian Gulf, or excuse me, in the Indian Ocean. So that's an option. But we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is the deployment of the B-61 tactical nuke. And that is kind of the industry standard that the United States has now gone to in terms of its nuclear arsenal since the end of the Cold War. And that B-61 nuke, that's this guy right here. You see it on a little carrier? It's about the size of a JDAM. It's about the size of other. In fact, it's smaller than a JDAM or other 2,000-pound bombs to the like that Israel has been dropping on Gaza every day and continues to do. It's not even as big as one of those. It's obviously the tactical yield, more so than the explosive power, more so than the destruction, more so than what it will or will not do. Because I personally think that dropping the B-61 nuclear bomb, tactical nuke, on Pickaxe Mountain isn't going to do anything but leave a pretty nasty scar in the dirt or in the face of the mountain. Pickaxe Mountain is buried under almost 400 feet of solid granite. It's not the only way. And I know this because going back to con plan options, looking at North Korea, Iran, what we called hard target defeat, or hard targets being underground, reinforced in bunkers deep in the ground. The only way to get into Pickaxe Mountain and actually take, neutralize, destroy what may be of the nuclear capability of enriched uranium is to put boots on the ground, go in and get it. And we know that that option will not succeed. The option of dropping a nuclear weapon is also not going to achieve that strategic objective. Remember the objectives that were laid out in terms of why we're fighting this war, and the irony of the fact that the reason now we're still fighting this war over the Strait of Hormuz is a reason that was not even one of the objectives that we went to war for. I mean, the irony just drips in that. But looking at the use of a tactical weapon on Pickaxe Mountain will not achieve the strategic goal. What it will do strategically is create a whole nother level of mess when you consider China a nuclear power, Russia a nuclear power, Pakistan now part of the alliance with Turkey and Saudi Arabia, a nuclear power. And you consider that those energetic remainders and second and third order effects in the area of what can then come next in terms of nuclear escalation. That's the real concern to this, which I do not think the president is considering. So what will the use of this B-61 gravity bomb? The warhead only weighs about 700 pounds. I mean, you can bench press that, Nima. That's not a lot. So when you think about this, the use of this bomb and what will it achieve, not much. It's the maximalist position that Donald Trump has gone back to. We've seen that time and time again, that Donald Trump continues to go back to this maximalist demand, and it does not achieve the effect of ending this conflict. I believe that Iran is open to diplomacy. I believe that on the conflict continuum, here we are kind of going back between this road to diplomacy or large all-out war. Diplomacy or all-out war, right? Well, that return to diplomacy pathway is not in control of the United States. The United States no longer has the leverage or the political control in this pathway to avoid war. Iran controls that pathway, but Iran is not going to give in to diplomatic or political demands that are any less than what Iran demands maximally. So when you have two positions of maximalist strategic demands, it doesn't portend well for an end to a conflict. And I do think that we're going to see, because here are the military options, and I looked at this, and I think your audience will find this. I found it intriguing. I found it so interesting to look at how are we fighting this war right now? We're trying to make it a carrier battle. We're trying to make it a Navy battle. We're trying to make it a Navy war. Well, we've all heard the news lately, right? And that's another thing, if there's time in the segment, that I really want to hit home for the sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, or CVN 72, because I think more people need to hear the truth of the reality of what we're facing, what the United States is facing right now, because we were not prepared for this conflict. Right now, the USS George Washington, a Nimitz-class carrier, is on its way or about to be into the Arabian or the Indian Ocean to replace the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN 72. You notice those CVN numbers in terms of 72, 73? That means they were made right after each other. They are both Nimitz class. The George Washington is not some advanced save the day, latest advancement of Ford class carrier that's coming to save the day. The George Washington is as old as me. It was designed 44 years ago. It's been on the sea for nearly 35 years. And I, when you consider, here's the, I went to the U.S. Naval Institute page. I didn't just make this up. I didn't get this off of Wikipedia. I didn't get it from what I heard. I went to the United States Naval Institute official site to look at the condition of these ships. The USS George Washington was designed in 1982. It hit the water in 1992. It's a 44-year-old design, 34 years on the water, and it's replacing the USS Abraham Lincoln, which was designed in the same year. They're both Nimitz-class carriers. And what's worse is that what's going along with the USS George Washington here, Nimitz-class CVN 73 to replace the Lincoln, Nimitz-class CV.
Yeah,
Am I back?
You're back.
CVN 72. The USS George Washington, as part of its carrier fleet or its carrier strike group, is another U.S. ship called the USS Ben Fold, DDG 65. It didn't go with the George Washington initially, because remember, the George Washington is a Pacific Command carrier. It's being redesignated to replace the Lincoln, because this was never intended to be in terms of deployment length. The USS Ben Fold didn't go with the Washington. It's catching up now. It's getting out there now because it was in the Philippines getting replaced or getting repair parts done to repair its air conditioner, to repair its electric system, to replace all these things that were falling apart because it's an older class destroyer. So we're sending to the area of operations, not the newest, most advanced. We're sending the old stuff, because quite frankly, that's all the United States has right now. Because you remember the old USS Ford? Remember that guy? USS Ford was a Ford class carrier, our newest and best and most advanced, hit the water in 2017. Well, that's back getting repaired because it had a laundry room fire. Supposedly, I think it was struck by Iranian drones or Iranian anti-ship missiles or torpedoes. But that's out of the fight. The USS John F. Kennedy, the next in line in the Ford class, just got the check, if you will, the all clear. That was in the news on Friday. It passed sea trials and it's going to be underway soon. Well, they hurried that. They sped it up. And when you take something of that magnitude and you speed up the process to get it approved, there's probably going to be problems with it. Maybe another laundry room fire. I don't know, but it's not ready to go into war yet. So we're fighting this war with Iran with old, broken down stuff, with sailors and airmen and soldiers that have been put back and forth, and Marines back and forth on, we're going in, we're not, we're going in, we're not. We still have the 82nd Airborne Division deployed in the region, just waiting. We still have the 5th Amphibious Response Group just sitting there waiting on the USS Boxer, which is a WASP class carrier, which you want to talk about old. Oh, I mean, old. So, and oh, by the way, the Washington is going to replace the Lincoln to join the USS GW Bush, another Nimitz class carrier that is old. So what are the military options? What are the military options for the President of the United States, offered to him by Admiral Brad Cooper, the U.S. Central Command commander? What options are available militarily to compel Iran to come back to diplomacy? There aren't any. We've expended our precision strike munitions. We've expended our tactical and operational range precision munitions and our strategic. We don't have military options short of either we have to send in ground forces or we have to have another way. And this harkens back to the decision that Truman had to make in World War II, right? Do we invade mainland Japan? We know it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of lives of soldiers and sailors and Marines. America won't stand for that. We can't put American lives at risk. So we're going to use the nuclear bomb. And we did. I believe that Donald Trump feels that he is facing that same calculus. I feel that it's self-imposed based on the failure of this conflict and the lack of strategic, but trying to put myself into the, into the mindset of the President of the United States, I feel that he has convinced himself that those are his options. It's either ground troops, where thousands of Americans will die, ships will sink, or nuclear option, which won't it won't do anything to end the conflict, but it will give Donald Trump an exit strategy. Because if Donald Trump can convince his MAGA base, remember, midterms are coming up in November. Guess who's also facing elections here pretty soon? Netanyahu. Both of them want a way out of this quagmire. Both of them want a way out of this mess. Using a nuclear weapon, regardless of the truth. Remember in the whole aspect that I mentioned before of DIME, right? Of the, information, misinformation and disinformation. Donald Trump has no problem lying to the American public. He's doing it right now in terms of conditions on the USS Lincoln. So when you look at the aspects of what it will yield, it won't. But Donald Trump can sell it as a win to his hawkish MAGA base, to Americans that still want to believe that we are winning or can win this conflict, which we are not and we cannot. But to give them that victory of, look, Strait of Hormuz was never part of our concerns. Who cares? Strait of what? Regime change? Don't care. If the people of Iran want a regime change, they can do it. We gave them the keys to the kingdom. It's up to them. That's how Donald Trump sees it. But the nuclear aspect is something that he has hung his hat on from the beginning, right? Whether it was Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, Admiral Cooper, all of them. The various objectives, it's always come back. The one you can pick out that's always the same is this, they can't have a bomb. Iran can't have a bomb. Well, you can't prove that they do. You can't prove that they don't. All indications from the U.S. intelligence community say that they aren't. But hawks, war hawks in the government say that they are. So what better way to find an exit strategy or attempt one? I don't think it will succeed as an exit strategy, but at least to give the perception of an exit strategy as we approach November. Look, we destroyed their capability. The president of the United States was willing to do something that no president since Truman was willing to do. And he did it to save the world, to keep America safe from an Iranian nuke. That's the narrative. I think it's total bullshit, but that's the narrative that the president will try to sow. Bottom line is, there are no feasible military options to achieve an end state that the president can satisfy to the American people or to his constituents or his base. And the use of a tactical weapon is on the table. It is very likely already in theater. That picture that I showed you, you know how long it takes to put one of those onto an F-35 or an F-22? A good weapons mate, a good weapons crewman can do it in about 8 minutes. It's going to be used, I predict. I've thought that since the beginning, because when you look at this in terms of courses of action, there's no way out of this for Donald Trump. And he's desperately seeking for a way out. And desperate men in powerful positions do stupid things.
Tony, how is that gonna, maybe the other countries, I assume if the United States uses the nuclear weapons against Iran gonna go after, building nukes, and not Iran, other countries as well. Everybody would say, so what's the point of being part of the NPT? What does that mean anymore?
I think a lot of countries in the Gulf, in Western Asia, are already questioning that when you consider that Israel has nuclear weapons that they do not disclose, nor do they allow inspectors. And there's this whole, the Israeli disinformation game of, do we have them? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. They have nukes. Since John Pollard spied on America and sold the nuclear secrets to Israel, they have nukes. Period. The rest of the region knows that. And when you look at that in terms of if you're a country in that region, why should we play ball by the rules? Why? Because if you don't have a nuclear weapon and you have a